Hello, hello. I actually figured out how to make the mic work. It's a good start. I'm not very good at this. Welcome, y'all, to Calvary Chapel. My name's Dale. I'm one of the assisting pastors here. I'm also one of our chaplains for the sheriff's office here in Gallatin Valley. And that's how come we're all here. Because back in March, I went to an advanced chaplains academy for the MSPOA conference down in Billings, and I got to hear these wonderful people that are going to share with us tonight some pretty things that concern me greatly for my community, and I thought it best that we get the word out so people can be wise. 2 Timothy 1:7 says that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but power, love, and sound mind. So this is not to make anybody fearful, and I certainly hope that it doesn't. But it is to give you information so you know what's going on in our community, so you can be aware, so you can make your family members aware, you can help protect your families, teenagers and young ones, because there are predators among us that are definitely not on the same page that we are as freedom-loving Americans. So, with that, we'll share. And with wisdom comes power, right? And God gives us that power. He also gives us a sound mind. So we don't walk around in fear, but we walk around wise, right? Redeeming the times, for the days are evil. And the days are evil. I mean, we've got a lot of things going on. So I'm going to turn it over to Stacy. I got the chance to meet her a little bit, and she's a former DEA agent, and she's been around the world and done a whole bunch of things. Her description is she's a jack of all trades and a master of none, but I don't know that I agree with that. Stacy, let's welcome her.
Thank you so much. Okay, can y'all hear me? So my name is Stacy Zinn. I used to be the regional agent in charge here in DEA, in the state of Montana. I've been here for over 10 years in a supervisory position. Prior to that, I started my career off in 2001 on the southwest border. That's when 2001 is when I learned about the cartels and actually did a lot of undercover work and built investigations against them. From there, I was selected for a tactical team where I went back and forth to Afghanistan, did 4 tours over there. My job there was to do helicopter operations into the mountain regions, find the heroin labs, gather up evidence, and build investigations, international investigations from there. After that, I did 5.5 years down in South America. My job down there was to train the proving officers, teach them how to build long-term cocaine cases, and also to build the wire interception program. And what do I mean by that? Those cellular phones that y'all carry, we have the capability, when we had the proper court order, to actually listen to conversations, read text messages, yada, yada. That's what the Peruvians wanted to do. They wanted to build their interception program. Brazil's notorious for theirs. Colombia's notorious for theirs. Chile has one. Basically, every country down there has one now. And then, after that, I applied for a supervisory position, and they said, "You're going Montana?" And I'm like, "Montana? Are there drugs in Montana?" And I had to say, so I was pleasantly surprised. But yes, we have a huge, huge drug problem. But what I want to do is I want to extend this presentation out to something a little bit different that I normally don't do. I also talk a little bit about the terrorist because it's all starting to go hand in hand with our open southwest borders. So let's go back to Afghanistan. When I was in Afghanistan I dealt a lot with narco-terrorists. What's a narco-terrorist? A narco-terrorist is a terrorist organization that use the sale of narcotics, drugs, to build, when they sell their heroin, over there was heroin, when they sold their heroin, they get the monies back. They take the monies back to another foreign country, maybe like China, buy bombing material, bring the bombing material back to Afghanistan, build the IEDs, and that's what they laid out for our military and our ISAF partners and stuff like that. So we had a group of individuals that were doing that all throughout Afghanistan. Well, you look at the way that we departed Afghanistan. We left a lot of assets over there, and we left a lot of disgruntled people there. Those, when I was there in 05, 07 through 08, we were dealing with a lot of terrorist organizations. Well, those fathers of terror, they had sons. Those sons have grown up, and now, unfortunately, they're in the game too. What does this have to do with Montana? I'll circle back around pretty soon. But we saw how we departed, and now we see an influx of Afghanis coming in. They're not being vetted like they're supposed to be. I don't care what anyone says, they are not being vetted. We didn't have we didn't have them in CIC over there where we can fingerprint them and we knew their full names and stuff and they had a database. No, it's not the case. So what worries me is that we have individuals that are now coming over here that are coming through the NGOs, non-government agencies, and we don't know who's coming through or coming into our communities. That's worrisome. You shift down to Venezuela. Venezuela, they've been in the news of the Tren de Agua, that gang that was in Aurora, Colorado. They're in Dallas. They are in Illinois. They are in, obviously, Colorado, and they're spreading out from there. What they didn't also share with you is that we have MS-13 doing the exact same thing in these apartment complexes in Fairfax and Alexandria, Virginia. What they didn't share you that we have California being taken over by a lot of these nefarious groups. So we are a hodgepodge enough. We are very vulnerable at this time. We have, Yellowstone County had just recently authorized, or the NGOs are bringing in 100 families from, and it's kind of wishy-washy. Are they coming from Afghanistan? Maybe. Are they coming from Syria? Maybe. Are they coming from Ukraine? Maybe. But these individuals are coming into our areas, and we really don't know who's coming in. You have cartel members that are basically in bed with these individuals, and they are helping them get established here in the United States. With our open borders like that, in order for an individual to cross into the United States, you're going to have to pay the cartel. And we're going to talk about the cartels, and I'm going to tell you how do we come to this point. But reason why I want to talk about the terrorists and stuff like that, because it goes hand in hand. When you have a terrorist organization here on U.S. soil, they're going to commit crimes in order to fund their operations, and that does mean drug trafficking. So we have to start opening up our eyes of what is in our backyard. And Montana is very vulnerable because you don't have enough boots on the ground to take care of business. You don't have enough of those three-letter agencies here working in the state to take care of business. And I'm being very transparent and very honest about this. I couldn't say it when I was working with DEA, but I can say it now because my government handcuffs have come off. But we have a problem here in the state of Montana, and we got to start gearing up. With that being said, I will start with the actual drug presentation and circle around with the Venezuelans, Hondurans, and the other members coming into our country. So how do we get here? The cartel, has anyone here seen Narcos, the show Narcos? So Narcos pretty much explains about the cartels, about what DEA did. We were in approximately, I keep saying we, they are, it was we, but they were, DEA's in approximately 80, well, I'd say 72 different countries throughout the world. But we specialize in Mexico and South America because that's where the bulk of our drugs were coming in at that time. Back in the mid-'80s, you had what's called the Federation, the Mexican Federation. It was headed up by Galindo. Then you had the Guadalajara cartel. You had the Sinaloa cartel, these four here. You had the Tijuana cartel, and then you had the Chihuahua, the Ciudad Juarez cartel. When I was down in Mexico, I was dealing with Amado's brother, Vicente, and then dealing with Chapo. Chapo was coming into the area. But back in the 80s, the cartels were like corporations. Your main boss, you had your different areas of Mexico, like Sinaloa, Tijuana, Gulf, Michoacan. You had it all separated, and they all had to pay. They all played nice together because they wanted to make. Their goal was to make money, not to upset the apple cart. The Tijuana cartel right here, I'm sorry, here, back up here. The Tijuana cartel, the Adriana brothers, they were known as the Crazy Brothers. Armado up there, he was known as Lord of the Skies. He's the one that actually started transporting flying cocaine from South America to Mexico and then across the border. Chapo Guzman, y'all should know him. He's the one that was extradited about a couple of years ago. He was the head of the cartel. El Mayo just made a lot of headlines. He's the one that allegedly was on a plane and was flown over international border and was arrested here. And then Azul over here, he was passed away. And then you have this individual up there. I always forget his name. He's the one that was part of the head of a Guadalajara cartel. Their structure, their world. Where am I pointing at here? Wait. Their world collapsed when 1985, when this special agent from DEA, Kiki Camarena, was kidnapped and eventually killed. He was in Guadalajara. He was actually going to be rotating out and going back to San Diego. He had received source information that there was a new marijuana being crossbred, and there was acres and acres and acres of it. So he got a pilot. They flew over it and found this, massive amounts of marijuana. He coordinated with the embassy and the consulate's office, and they set up a raid. And long story short, they raided the whole marijuana plantation, and the cartel, the Guadalajara cartel, lost lots and lots of money. Well, they did. The Mexican cartel did not sit on its heels. And what ended up happening when Kiki was supposed to meet his wife for lunch one day, they pulled up beside him when he's getting out of the vehicle. They kidnapped him, and they took him back to a stash location and tortured him for 3 days. How do we know this? Because they recorded it. We had two of those days of recordings. The third day we do not have. That's when we realized how the Mexican government was involved in the drug trafficking that's taken place. What ended up happening is that we, the U.S., had demanded to get Kiki's body back. Long story short, they had buried him originally. They dug up his body. And the pilot that flew Kiki over. We got the body back. We gave him a stateside funeral, but then we really went down hard on Mexico. We went after all the traffickers that were involved in his kidnapping, and that's when we saw the Mexican cartel start really splintering because of it. Back in this daytime, during this time frame, this was how the Mexico was divided up in the cartels. You fast forwarded to, this is 2015, we start seeing how more cartels are splintering and stuff like that. So when you had the head of the Federation go to jail, and then you had all these other cartels starting to fight each other, they're fighting each other for territory. What they were doing is that there was a lot of killings taking place. There was a lot of bridge hangings. There was a lot of skinning. Mexico is a narco state. I don't care what anyone says. It's controlled majority by the Mexican cartel. This is 2015, how the cartels were splitting up Mexico. And then you fast forward, this is 2021. We started seeing two Mexican cartels start becoming more dominant. The two are Sinaloa cartel, which was controlled then by Chapo Guzman, and El Mayo Zambada, and then the Nueva Generación cartel, CJNG. The reason why I bring these up, because those are the two that are sitting here in your backyard. The CJNG and the Sinaloa cartel. The bottom right here, this is Los Chapitos. So when Chapo Guzman was arrested, his sons took over half the cartel. Now these, they just made news. One of them's already, well, two of them have been extradited. One of them is about to be, and this is El Mayo. Ismael Zambada Garcia. He was the other half of Sinaloa cartel. Basically what had happened, it looks like Los Chapitos, I would say that they pretty much made a deal with the government in order to, and they lured him to the border. I don't want to use the word lure. Let me change that. They somehow fabricated a story, got him closer to the border, and that's now he has been arrested. So the entire Federation is either dead or is dead or has been arrested. But these are Los Chivos. These are the ones that will send the fentanyl pills through, and they'll land in Butte or they'll land into rural areas that are being distributed here in Montana. He was more old school. He did a lot of bulk carrying stuff. He would have stuff transported. You go up there to CJNG, El Mencho, he came powerful in about 2011, And he was part of the organizations that went after the Gulf Cartel, and they would kill the Zetas. But what is interesting about him, he is old school. He's the one you can Google, and you'll see him with his armored vehicles, his long-range weaponry. They wear a lot of masks. They will bulk ship their drugs, meaning they will have vehicles transport drugs across the southwest border and drive them all the way to California and then all the way to Montana. Whereas Los Chapitos, what they're doing, they're very comfortable in putting drugs into the mail and mailing them up here. Also, Los Chapitos, what they would do is they would actually get into Bitcoin, electronic currency, whereas El Mencho and CJNG, what they would do was that you would see monies be picked up, let's say Gallatin County, be hidden in compartments in vehicles, driven down to California, and then driven across the border that way. So he was a lot more, he was still old school. It's easier to track them, and I probably shouldn't say this as being recorded, but it's easier to track CJNG's movement versus the Sinaloa cartel. They are more, the newer generation are more technically savvy versus CJNG. Where am I clicking? Oh, there I am. Okay, so as I said, like CJNG, see, they do the weaponry and stuff. They're very flashy. They do the Mexican colors. They're out to scare people. They're violent, a lot more violent than the Sinaloa is violent, but they've taken it a step farther. You look over here, Los Chapitos, we call them basically the yuppie cartel. They will dress up in their El Prado outfits. They imitate the flashier stuff. They are more into social media, and it's because it's the newer generation of drug traffickers that are coming up, stepping up into play. This is what they basically control now. The red is Sinaloa cartel. The green highlight area is the CJNG, and then the multiple red and green crossover. Now, the reason why you see the crossover, because CJNG really came, they were buddies with Sinaloa to begin with. And so they didn't just break away. Sinaloa kind of encouraged them because CJNG was taking over smaller cartels. And so that way, you don't see them being as rivals as much as the other type of cartels that have been out there. This is an outdated DEA map. Cartels are in every single state here in the United States. They're definitely in Montana, Wyoming, the Dakotas, definitely in Washington and Oregon. They control a lot of that territory right there. These are just different representations of the different cartels. We do have different cartels here in the United States. This is a global look at CJNG and the Sinaloa. The Sinaloa is the red. The green is CJNG, and then the blue is them where they're sharing territory. They are worldwide. They are billion-dollar cartels. They have a lot more money than local law enforcement will ever have. That's why they're so powerful. So how's our flow of drugs? Which way do we see them? Obviously, the flow of drugs, the bulk of our drugs, even for Montana, comes across the southwest border. With the border being so wide open, it's a lot easier for them to transport. One time they'll send some decoys. They'll send, like, let's say 20 kilos of cocaine in a vehicle, and maybe that driver makes a mistake. Law enforcement focuses on that vehicle. Meanwhile, there's 100 kilos in another vehicle right behind it, and it's able to get through. We see that type of transportation, the methods of transportation. We see individuals backpack marijuana still across our southwest border. We see individuals body carry fentanyl pills across our southwest border. But also, our ports are also vulnerable. They will put in multiple kilos of cocaine and meth onto our cargo ships and then sending them up that way. They'll also send boats and stuff up our shorelines and then offload them that way. So, but a bulk of your drugs here in the state of Montana comes from the southwest border. Right now, we're not seeing a lot of drugs come from Canada down into Montana, which to me surprises me because Canada has super labs, fentanyl super labs up there. But it's only a matter of time if we don't get our northern border taken care of also. They will also, the cartel, like I said, the Los Chapitos will send drugs through the U.S. Postal Service, FedEx, UPS, any way they can, get it up here without them having to physically drive it up here. It saves them a lot of time, it saves them money. But we do see that. What they'll do is they'll box up maybe a stuffed animal, fill it up with a certain drug, especially the fentanyl pills, and the fentanyl pills will be delivered by your postal service, and they won't know any better. It's sad, but that's what's taking place. Also, your vehicles. Your vehicles have a lot of hidden voids in it. What they'll do is that they will actually stuff pills, and you can't even find them. We had known that we had a shipment of pills coming in. We got the vehicle stopped. We searched and searched and searched and couldn't find those pills. Finally, one of the officers says, "Stacy, put your hand in this cubby hole here and reach all the way down." And sure enough, once I got it, I felt something, plastic and stuff. We stripped it, the inside of it, and found 3,000 pills stashed all the way down. So it's easy to hide these drugs in natural voids of vehicles, and that's why we miss a lot of drugs. This is more of a marijuana slide. We see a lot of black market marijuana being grown in the western states, and it will be driven across to like Minneapolis, Chicago, Michigan area, and then we see the flow of money coming back. Lots of monies are flowing across our state line. That is why it's very important that we have a strong interdiction team, which is then, that means that we have to get a Supreme Court that's gonna uphold the laws of the land, because our interdiction teams are getting hammered by the Supreme Court on investigations that have been overturned based on legislating from the bench. But this is just a slide just to show the flow of drugs and money. Okay, so I would say probably 3 months ago, I would have said meth is king here. Meth is the #1 drug now. It's not. Fentanyl has now taken it over. But meth is still very, very popular here. When I am talking to kids and stuff, I always talk about the types of what goes into meth, but this is what meth looks like. It looks like a crystal quartz. Anyone's a rock hound like I am, you just get one of those crystal quartz. That's what meth looks like when it's in its large, when it's not grinded up. The chemicals, I always talk to the kids about the chemicals that are in meth. And the reason I do this is kind of to basically spook them a little bit. Because I'll say, "Hey, Joey, if you're going to go to a party on Saturday night, you knock on that front door, and before you walk in the door, they say you have to drink a half a glass of Drano. Would you do it?" And Joey normally says, "What's Drano?" But then I say, "Okay, brake fluid or something." And say, "Oh, no, that's a dumb question. I wouldn't do that." Well, then I said, if you're not willing to drink half a glass of these chemicals, then why would you ever try meth? And I was trying to start planting those seeds, because this is the ingredients that's in meth. Now, the kids will ask me, "Well, how do you know this?" And I say, "Well, because DEAs in Mexico are probably 98% of our meth, crystal meth, comes from the Mexican cartel. It's made in the jungle regions, and when the Mexican, normally the Marines and stuff, they go in and hit these labs, DEA's normally in the background, and we go in and gather up the evidence just like I did in Afghanistan, and make sure that we have we know the same ingredients that's going into these drugs. And the reason we always keep our finger on the pulse of these type of recipes is because there's times when a bad batch of drugs will come and hit our communities. Just like in Helena, several years back, there was some green heroin up there that had killed 4 people. Well, I told my team, get out there and buy some green heroin to find out what's in it, because we want to know if we have individuals out there that are purposely killing off their competitors, or did they just mess up the recipe. So that's why we keep our finger on the pulse of the recipe. But this is meth. The faces of meth, when I was a baby agent down in El Paso, I thought, "Oh, this is fake. This is just photoshopped." No, this is actually true. You see how the face starts changing. They start thinning out, especially if they're injecting meth. They start getting sores and stuff because they start having paranoia, and they start thinking there's creepy crawlies underneath their skin, so they start scratching. I've seen that multiple times here in the state of Montana. You have a lot of people up here that are using meth. They're using it intravenously. So this is not to scare students or the community. This is how I normally saw the meth bagged, especially in dealer amounts. Whenever I did a raid, I always did with my teams. I did go through the front door during arrest or search warrants, we'd always find these baggies. If you're ever in a location where you see these baggies and it looks like it has drug residue, please do not pick it up with your bare hands, because it may not be meth residue. It may actually be fentanyl residue, and we'll get to that in a minute. This pipe down here is how they normally smoke meth. This is just an up close. Another. This is, in these containers, this is liquid meth. So I said that they can backpack meth across, they can put it in vehicles, but they can also liquefy it. And what we've seen them do is liquefy meth, the Mexican cartel. They'll pour it into the gas tank. Meth settles down to the bottom. They pour the gasoline on top of it, and they quickly drive over the port of entry. If that inspector doesn't have that long dipstick to dip all the way to the bottom of it and take a sample of it and test it for drugs, he or she may have missed a whole shipment of drugs. And this is what we just seen. What they'll do then, they'll drive to a business or whatever, drain the engine, they'll bring a chemist up there to recrystallize it to make it look like that crystal quartz again. Your meth up here is around 98% pure. Yellowstone County is not abnormal for me to see it 100% pure. In Great Falls and Helena area, I sometimes will see it dip down to 70% pure. That always caught my attention, because then I'm like, they're cutting it with they're cutting it with a different ingredient, and we got to find out what that ingredient is. So, but your meth is very pure up here. That's why bathtub meth, that's one of the reasons why it disappeared. Also because we put ephedrine behind the counter, Sudafed, but the local distributors, the local cooks could not compete with the Mexican cartel. Their Mexican cartel has a lot better product. We shift over to prescription pills real quick. We all know that the backstory on our pill issue. A certain pharmaceutical company back in the late 90s decided they wanted to get richer, and they misled doctors, physicians, soccer moms, nurses, and said OxyContin was not addicting. Unfortunately, that was a flat-out bold lie. OxyContin is highly addicted and can be easily misused. But back in 1997 and 2001, DEA started seeing that drug addiction start really, we found out we had a problem where the sale of Oxy was taking place. A lot of rogue pharmacists was selling scripts, $500 a script or more, and that's when we started seeing a problem on our streets. So what's addicting? These are opioids. These are man-made opioids in laboratories. You have tramadol, you have morphine, you have hydros, you have oxycodone, oxycontin. Let's see, what else? Fentanyl. So this is all in the pain family. I'm not saying never to take a pain med, but if you're ever prescribed these type of drugs, ask your physician, how long do I need to be on this until it relieves the pain? Because you don't know when your addiction could take place. We've had soccer moms that took 2 pills, had 2 glasses of wine that night, and swore that night that they became addicted. We've had individuals, 30 days, they become addicted. You don't know. It's how you're chemically made up. It doesn't matter if you're short, small, skinny, or tall, or fluffy. It just, you don't know how your body, it's your brain receptor, how it reacts to it. So what we end up seeing was, I want to say 2014 and 15, we had a pill epidemic here. We had a bad pill problem, and we're seeing individuals from 19 years of age up to 32 really getting into the pill scene. And reason being, sometimes they were athletes, they had a sporting injury, then they were overprescribed drugs, and they become addicted. We also seen individuals that they were getting the prescriptions and then realizing that they were becoming addicted, but they didn't have the means to pay for them, so they'd sell off half their pills. We start seeing crime go up. We start seeing pawn shops start receiving a lot of stolen merchandise. What they were doing was swapping stolen merchandise for cash, taking that cash to their drug dealers and getting their drugs again. Or what they were saying, or what was happening was that these individuals are stealing things and then giving the stolen merchandise to their drug dealers and getting their drugs that way. So we had a huge problem. But the Mexican cartel was watching this, and they're like, oh, no. We don't want Big Pharma making all this money. We're going to send another drug up to Montana that's the exact same high. It's going to be a lot cheaper, and we're going to make some profits off of that. So your pill prices were really all over the place here in Montana. For example, if I was in Vegas doing undercover work, I could buy a 130 milligram of OxyContin for $15. I come up to Yellowstone County, they would charge me $35. If they wanted to rip me off, then I would buy it for $42. If I went up to Rocky Boy Reservation, then they would charge me $67. If I went over to Wolf Point, they would charge me $89. If I went to Sydney, Montana, they would charge me $100 for that one pill. So the cartels was like, That's when they started sending up heroin. They started sending up little baggies of heroin that would be equivalent to like 2.5 pills. So let's say that I was a user, I'm using 3 pills a day. It's costing me $100 a day. Multiply that by 7, that's $700 a week. Multiply that by 2 weeks, that's $1,400. You see where I'm going. So someone comes up to me and says, hey, Stace, you are addicted to 3 pills a day. You use 3 pills a day. How about I sell you this little baggie with brown powder or brown, looks like brown sugar. It's equivalent to 2.5 pills, and I'll sell it for you. I'll sell it to you for $14. What do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to kick over to that $14 product, but then I'm going to have to start injecting it because that's really the major way that you use heroin. And then that's where we started seeing our heroin take off. But heroin is kind of hit and miss. It was kind of short-lived. It's not as popular as the other drugs. Heroin is still a dirty drug. It's cut with a lot of stuff. It's around 23 to 25% pure here. It can look like, this right here looks like, to me, dark brown sugar. This is actually Mexican brown. This right here is black tar. It's a little bit stickier and stuff. It also comes from the Mexican cartel. But I always scare the kids too with this photograph down below. And I'll say, hey, can anyone tell me why there's a lot of holes in the arms? And there's only one student's been able to tell me. Does anyone here want to take a guess of why there are holes in this arm? Way back there in the back. But take it a little bit step further. Why? Shout it. Go ahead and shout it out. Leftover needles. Take it a step farther. Dirty needles. One more, a little bit farther. So, remember I said this is about 23% pure? So when drug dealers want to maximize their profits, they're going to mix something into the drug that it looks very similar like. Okay, so where if it was meth, they would put maybe rock salt in it. With heroin, what looks like heroin? Meat tenderizer. So they get the meat tenderizer, mix it up with heroin. Once you heat that up, you start injecting it. If you inject it into your vein, eventually that vein's going to collapse. Where you're going to go hit your other vein, that's going to collapse. Where you're going to get desperate enough that you need that drug into your system, what do? You put it into your muscle. What does meat tenderizer do to muscle? That's why you get those dips. That's why you start seeing the holes in the arms and stuff, because it's eating out the muscle. So I tell the kids that, to also just say, hey, this is a dirty drug. You don't want to use it. Okay, so I want to say 2018, we started hearing about this new drug coming out. And we were hearing that people were overdosing on it, and some were overdosing and dying. Well, what we did not really, we knew in other parts of DEA, we knew that there was a drug coming out of China called fentanyl. Now, fentanyl had been around since 2006, and let me see if I can jump up to it. Since 2006, and there was, where am I supposed to point this at? Sorry, I should have the slide up a little bit more. Should be the next one here. Boom. Hello. In 2006, there was a lab down in Toluca. The Chinese had coordinated with the Mexican cartel and started sending the fentanyl from China because they were making it in their illegal labs, and they were sending it down to Mexico. Mexico did not understand what they had on their hands. They thought, okay, it's a cheap opiate, man-made opiate, we'll send it across the border. Well, they sent it across the border, and they killed pretty much 1,200 people instantly. The Mexican cartel went, whoa, no, we're killing off our customers, we can't do that, so they pulled it back. But this is a lab that really started it all, way back when. And what we saw was fentanyl appeared, and then it quickly disappeared. And that was good for law enforcement, but it wasn't, I mean, it was only a matter of time before it was going to come back. So this is the first lab, but let me take you back to why fentanyl is actually dangerous. So that first container right there, that's a lethal dose of China white, heroin that's come from Asia. They make a more pure heroin than the Afghanis and the Pakistanis and the Mexican cartel does. You go to that middle container, that's a lethal dose of fentanyl right there. You shift over to the right, that's a lethal dose of carfentanil. Y'all had a carfentanil case you actually had 2 cases here that end up killing a handful of people. It was a very sad situation, but that's when carfentanil came on scene. Carfentanil is a tranquilizer that's utilized for elephants and rhinoceroses. It's pretty much controlled now. It's hard to get, but if you ever hear of carfentanil being in your area, call law enforcement immediately. Fentanyl is a, if you ever had a colonoscopy or you've had cancer or something, they'll give you fentanyl at the hospital. Now, I've had fentanyl. I had a appendicitis last year, and they're saying, okay, we'll give you some fentanyl for the pain. I'm like, oh, no. But you know, I took a step back. Okay, these are the physicians, so they know my body weight, they know my heart rate, they know my breathing and stuff, so they gave me little amounts. The street distributor does not know how much fentanyl is in that pill. So here's the problem with fentanyl. What it does is when you go through an overdose, what happens is that opioid slams on your brain receptor, and it slows down your heart, slows down your breathing. If law enforcement doesn't get on scene or EMT doesn't get on scene quick enough to give you Narcan, you can overdose and die. What the problem was is fentanyl, it comes and slams on your brain receptor, causing your breathing to just you go into overdose very, very quickly. Sometimes it takes 2 hits of Narcan to bring you back. Sometimes it takes 4 hits of Narcan. It depends on how much fentanyl is in that pill or in that powder. So that's what makes fentanyl so dangerous. Remember I said you picking up that product, you're not gonna really absorb it through your skin. What happens is when you pick up that product, and let's say that maybe it's a powder stuff and you put it by your nose or you have an itch or something and you inhale it, that's when it hits your respiratory system and that's when it can shut you down. It can be used as a mass weapon. I know the FBI years ago was watching this product because they're worried that if you put fentanyl into the air ducts or something, you can lose a lot of people instantly because it getting into your respiratory system. But this drug is very, very dangerous, and right now people are asking and requesting it. Why are they doing it? When you first take that pain med or you take a heroin, you get that euphoric wow feeling. Well, when you take that drug over and over again, you get high, but where's that euphoric feeling? It's called chasing the high, chasing the dragon. Someone's out there figured out when you take fentanyl each and every time, you get that euphoric feeling. That's why we have individuals that are playing Russian roulette in order to get that certain high and that makes them feel good each and every time. And that's why we're seeing a lot of more overdose deaths taking place. Again, this is just a representation that looks like you got grains of salt right here. That's actually a lethal dose of fentanyl that can kill you, especially if you don't have the foundation. However, people are now getting the foundation. They're building up tolerance. These are actually, looks like Oxy 30s. This is actually fentanyl pills right here. This is still one of the main reasons why I talk to kids and stuff and try to educate them because of the dangers of this pill. We have too many kids that grow up right now taking Adderall pills, taking ibuprofen, taking Tylenol, aspirin, whatever. They're used to taking pills. When they go to college, freshman years of college, you know, it's a different experience. They go and they're like, oh my gosh, I got to study. Well, I got to cram for 28 or 40 hours before that final. Hey, Joey, I need a Percocet, or I need a pain, I got a headache, or I need something that's going to keep me awake all night. Well, Joey said, sure. But Joey may have gotten that pill from Bob, and Bob may have got it from Mary Sue down the street. We're seeing more and more kids die in their dorms because they're actually receive a fake pill. They didn't know it, so it's an accidental overdose death. So we do see that take place. Why did the cartels get into this if they're going to kill off customers? It's just too lucrative. It costs anywhere 4 cents to 25 cents to make. Remember I said you can still get in Sydney, Montana, you can sell that pill for $120? Well, if you're making a product for 4 cents and you're making such high profits, why not? So they were playing a game where they percentage. Well, they can kill off some customers, but they're going to make a lot more money on the rest of the customers. When I told you that small amount of fentanyl can kill you, then how can people use 5 to 10 pills a day? What they're doing is they're actually smoking the pills. If you ever if you're searching someone's bedroom or whatever, you see foil. And if you see brown zigzags, it looks like it's been burned. Normally what has happened is that foil, someone's heated it up from the bottom, has smoked it. But if you see purple or blue zigzags or straight lines, that is a fentanyl pill that's been placed on it and that's been heated up and that's been snorted or it's been smoked. What we're seeing people do now is get like a foil ice cream cone, drop about 15 or 20 pills in it, heat it up from the bottom, take a hit, sit it down for 30 minutes, take another hit, and keep doing the process over and over again. So that's how they're using so many pills every 30 minutes, every 45 minutes, and stuff like that. But you got to ask yourself, how are they being able to afford it? And that's always the big question. The one thing also about fentanyl, you don't need it's not plant-based. Whereas heroin's plant-based. You have to have the poppy plant. Cocaine, which we'll talk about in a minute, is plant-based. You have to have the coca leaf. But fentanyl, it is all synthetic chemicals, so it's a lot cheaper. So the Mexican cartel, okay, so the pharmaceutical company started manufacturing this. We already spoke about this. It was for legitimate medical use, but then the cartels figured out, and the Chinese figured out how to actually abuse this and how to actually gain more customers, but through addition. Excuse me. These are just scenarios where back in 2019, 2020, we started seeing fentanyl being mailed, and what was being mailed through our postal system. And what the problem was that we were worried that the Postal Service would actually pick up a box and it was maybe cracked open or whatever, and then they would be exposed to fentanyl. So that became a huge problem. I would say that DEA was a little bit, again, behind the times on getting out our, doing public and safety awareness. We finally caught up. This is just examples of different seizures and plane crashes and stuff that involve fentanyl. Chemicals, we see chemicals that will actually be sent to the United States, and then those chemicals will be diverted back to Mexico, and then the fentanyl will be made. And then during, and I'm not getting to a political thing here, but it was during the Trump administration when he started talking to, I say, the dictator, about his illegal labs being, his legal fentanyl labs in China. Trump made a deal with the dictator to start going after the fentanyl analogs and stuff, the chemicals and stuff like that. So that was the first agreement, because we kept coming after the Chinese and saying, hey, we have a problem over here. Can you start raiding these labs? And the Chinese would look at us and say, hey, supply and demand. We don't have a problem here in China. You guys have a problem of addiction over in the U.S. So China agreed to make fentanyl a controlled substance after the U.S. talked to them at the G2 summit, which was a good thing. So what we started seeing is that the Chinese started pulling back their fentanyl from Mexico. But unfortunately, India came into play, and India started coordinating with the Mexican cartels and started sending chemicals down to Mexico, and the cartels it was a little hiccup, but then they started manufacturing fentanyl down there. Meanwhile, we started seeing chemicals being shipped across to Canada, and Canada has some fancy labs up there. They started making their own fentanyl up there. Again, we're not seeing the fentanyl trickle down to the U.S. yet, at least through Montana. We were seeing, and I just want to mention this real quick because this is a college town. 2018-19, we were starting to see another. It looked like fentanyl, but it wasn't. In your campuses here, you had U-477, and you had another one here that the kids were ordering, or students were ordering off the internet. That ended up killing a couple individuals, but that has now slowly disappeared. This is what the first fentanyl pills started looking like, fluorescent blues, but the cartel has now improved their product to make it look like more Oxy 30s. Fentanyl patches are still being distributed occasionally. People will get the fentanyl patches cut in quarters and put it into their gum line and suck on it. Or they'll put multiple patches on their arms. We have people that have overdosed during this way. Suboxone is a love-hate thing for me. Suboxone is used for those that are addicted and they're trying to not go through all these withdrawals. We have a high line full of individuals that when they're pregnant and they're addicted to opioids, they're prescribed Suboxone. Unfortunately, and I'm careful how I say this now because I was corrected, when a baby is born, they are dependent on this drug. They're not addicted, because I was told addicted means that they want it. So when they come out of the womb and stuff like that, they are dependent on Suboxone. So they have to go through the withdrawals and stuff like that. So that's why this is a love-hate drug for me, because we're starting a lot of new addicts. Xanax, that's actually a fake fentanyl pill. So they'll make Xanax and Percocets, Adderall pills to make it look like those pills, but they're actually fentanyl pills. This is what we see on the streets right now. That looks like a 30 milligram oxy. This is actually a fentanyl pill. Just some seizures. That shit's the price markup. We've already spoken about that. This right here is your, you call it your Skittles. I'm gonna say a couple years ago, the media got a hold of this. There was a shipment that was seized up in the East Coast. Customs had opened up a bag of Skittles, and there was all these fake colored pills. Then the press got a hold of it and said, "Oh my gosh, the cartel's trying to kill our kids." No, they weren't trying to kill the kids. That was just the way they transported them. Smuggling technique, and what they did was normally those bag of Skittles would gotten to their destination. The individuals would then repackage them, but unfortunately, well, it was actually fortunate because that's when the media jumped on this and actually spread the news about this type of fentanyl product being out there. It's no different from the blue ones. It's a marketing ploy. It's just to entice those younger kids or those younger adults. This was the very first seizure here in Montana of the colorful pills. That baggie right there was found in Butte gas station in the parking lot. Someone had actually dropped it, and someone picked it up and gave it to law enforcement. So that's when we knew that we had colorful Skittles coming to our area. Which one do I have left? Okay, these are just different seizures and stuff like that. Uh-oh. What did I do? Hello. This is powder fentanyl. We're starting to see powder fentanyl here. We're also seeing what's called pink fentanyl. If you hear about pink fentanyl, call your local law enforcement, because the pink fentanyl has xylazine in it. Xylazine has been added to the product. We believe it's been cut here in the United States. Xylazine is also a tranquilizer, and Narcan does not help bring a person back if they have also xylazine in it. So that's something that's very dangerous. Again, it's a marketing ploy, but Philadelphia is when we started seeing the xylazine and fentanyl really take off. This looks like Mexican tar, black tar, and this looks like a Mexican brown. That's actually fentanyl. It's made to look like heroin. Cocaine real quick, because I've only got a little bit of time. Applaud yourself, because cocaine made the comeback right here in Gallatin County. So what we started seeing, this is still the rich man's drug. We see the bartenders, we see still attorneys and doctors that will use this drug. But what we started seeing is when Big Sky started really picking up, when the construction crews started coming in, then we started seeing cocaine flowing in, and then it came into Gallatin County, and then boom, it springboarded for the rest of Montana. So y'all can basically say that y'all were the #1 in the state for the cocaine to start. The problem with the cocaine, because it looks like powder fentanyl. So we have individuals that are mixing fentanyl into cocaine. Some of y'all are as old as me, so you think back at the Saturday Night Live skits and stuff, John Belushi, Richard Pryor, some of those yahoos, those comedians and stuff, they were speedballing, and they were using cocaine and heroin. Well, what we're seeing today, we're seeing fentanyl being mixed in cocaine, and or sometimes meth. They're speedballing that way. With cocaine, you do have to have the cocoa leaf, and I always tell my students, I show them this, I show them the gasoline that's needed, and I tell them it takes about 24 hours to make, and the ammonia and stuff like that. And then some kids will start looking at this, and they'll say, well, wait a minute, why does that person have a hole in their nose? And I said, well, how do you use cocaine? And they're like, oh, you snort it. And I said, well, if you snort enough gasoline up your nose, what's going to happen? And then that's when they get kind of grossed out and stuff like that. So we do see that. Marijuana, I'm going to go through marijuana real quick because marijuana is my big soap. That's my albatross. I apologize ahead of time. This is not the marijuana of the 70s. I always apologize to the students. I say, hey, on behalf of all the adults that voted to legalize this drug, I apologize to y'all. And they look at me like, why? And I said, listen, when I was growing up, a single joint had about 1.2 to 2.3 THC levels. You pass it around, take a hit, 1 or 2, you get 0.9% THC levels. You sit on a chair, you eat nacho-flavored Doritos, and you watch Fast Times at Ridgemont High. But you fast forward today, that same joint right now has anywhere from 33 to 35% THC levels. Those gummies, those edibles have 80% THC levels. Those dab products that these kids are vaping have 90% THC levels. Now, you should be asking me, well, Stace, what's the big deal about the high THC levels? And I'm saying that's a good question because here in the United States, we are not doing the studies that we should be doing. But Europe, they're doing it. They've figured out they have a mental health crisis, kind of like what we have here. What they started seeing is young white males were having these psychosis type issues at a younger age instead of later on in life. They started following these people, and they figured out these individuals that start smoking or ingesting this high THC product at a younger age when their brains were still not completely developed. If they're more prone to mental health issues, depression, schizophrenia, bipolarism, depression, it was drawing out the mental health issues sooner in life. Well, you fast forward today here, and we're seeing that you don't have to have family members that are more prone to mental health issues. These kids, with their brains are fully developing, a brain doesn't fully develop till age 26, at least for the guys. The girls mature a little bit sooner than that. And that also explains a lot of things. Anyway, I tease. Anyway, so with that being said, these kids are smoking this product because we as adults basically said, this is just a natural plant. It's okay. No, it's not like, we basically told them it's like drinking a Coors Light. No, this is like drinking a Scotch on the rocks now. That's why I apologize to these kids, because we as adults don't know what these kids are ingesting, and this high product is causing us havoc, and we're going to start seeing more mental health issues taking place right in our backyard, which this state is not prepared for. So if you don't know much about marijuana, the plant stuff that's called flower, this is your grinder. If you ever see it in your kid's room, be aware that they're probably utilizing it. This is what gives me the most heartburn, because this is like your vape product right here. This is what the kids are getting a hold of and actually vaping. Sometimes they will green out. We had some West High School boys. Three of them were greened out, meaning you're supposed to just take a hit. The kids call it take a suck, but you take a hit of it and walk away. These kids were hitting it. It's going straight to their brains. Boom, they would pass out. 2 of them went to the hospital. 1 got sent home. We've had a girl in the bathroom in another Shepherd High School, same thing. Frenchtown, same thing. I don't know about Gallatin County because y'all keep y'all's stories very quiet here. So yeah, these are the contraptions that the kids will utilize to use the marijuana product. This is called a dab product. It's like honey on wax paper. If I did a raid on a heroin house, I would find that. If I did a raid on a meth house, I would find that. This doesn't discriminate. All your different types of drug trailers, doesn't matter what your drug of choice is, the bulk of them would also use this product. This is shatter. This is what you can buy at your dispensaries. This is a cultivation and stuff like that. I'm still waiting for the major black market to come. We do know that marijuana goes out the back door of the dispensaries. We know it's being sold across state lines. But I am hoping, but I know that it's going to fall on deaf ears. But I worry about the foreign element coming in. In all the other states, the Chinese have pretty much controlled the marijuana trade, the black market trade. For example, in Colorado, DEA had identified about 200 different houses that were being utilized for indoor grows. The Hmong control Washington and Oregon black market trade. The cartels controlled the California black market trade. The Chinese have left, are in Colorado, but then they went down to Oklahoma and started doing, started the black market trade there, and they're also, we just saw recently that they're in Maine cultivating plants up there too. So it's only a matter of time with our vast amount of land here, with lack of law enforcement, we'll see some foreign entity coming here, probably so. I'm about out of town, so let's talk real quick about what I talked about Afghanis and the Venezuelans and coming in and stuff. Your Venezuelans that are coming across the border, a lot of them are linked to a criminal element. They are linked to the drug trade. We do have an influx of them coming here. They've been, people scoff at this, but the jails have been emptied in Venezuela, and they're coming here, and they will be into the illegal drug trade. You have a larger Hispanic community growing here, and I'm a Hispanic, so I feel comfortable saying this, is that you're going to have some bad apples come up here to start planting their flag, and that's what they've done here in Gallatin County. When you have one cartel that sits up here, they bring large shipments of drugs and use them and will rent a house and use it as a stash location, and then they'll distribute to the East Coast. Meanwhile, you have a second cartel that brings up large amount of drugs here and sells it on your streets, and it's being distributed. You're seeing the Mexican cartels that are building relationships with the Hondurans and the Venezuelans that are coming in, because these individuals are coming up here and they need a job, or they're looking for a job, or they're looking for more monies, and this is a place where they can make their monies. They make triple amount of monies off the sale of smaller amount of drugs than they can in Denver and Salt Lake City and California. That's what you have coming here. With the Afghanis and stuff like that, we don't see them so much right now in the drug trade and stuff, but it's something that we're going to have to keep our finger on it, because there's a lot of them that have not been vetted, and we don't know what's in our backyard, all right? So we just need to be, we need to take back our communities. We need to communicate with our loved ones, of our kids. We need to educate them, but we also need to help law enforcement, because we don't have enough boots on the ground. Y'all are our first lines of defense and stuff like that. So that's why I share this information. Is there any questions real quick before we go to the next presenter? Yes, sir.
I heard that MSU and the high schools here will not let you go and speak to them. Is that true? And then why and what did we do?
When I was at DEA, I did try very, very hard to get into the school system here to educate. This is a different nut to crack. I can't tell you why. I can't tell you why I was never able to get into the schools. I can only speculate. I know that everyone else across the state of Montana took me up on my offer, because I was doing free, and I still do. I still do free presentations to the kids, because it's important to me that kids know what these drugs are. So I can't tell you why. I tried and tried and tried, but it fell on deaf ears. Yes, ma'am. Is that public versus private? Private schools are a lot easier, because a parent will call up their principal and say, hey, you know what I'm trying to say. I've been able to get into the private schools easier than public. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
About a week ago, a little bit more, I met actually all our city commissioners in the library. I met them in person. I put your flyer there. I invited them. Come here. Did any one of them contact you?
No. And y'all I don't know if y'all still do, but y'all did have a cough medicine problem in your schools. Any other questions? Listen, I hope I didn't say anything that offended anyone. If I did, just come pull me aside and kick me in the shins or whatever. And please, it's the one thing that I want to stress: talk to your loved ones. If you have grandkids, if you have if your sons and daughters, talk to them. Start that. Hey, I heard that some girl was up there talking about dab. What's dab? And they're going to say, oh, mom, or oh, grandma, you know, but it gets them start talking. And you keep asking those questions and keep asking those questions. That's what I did with my daughter. My daughter is 16 years old, going on 25. But I've been able to start having those conversations. Hey, I hear about this. What's going on in your school and stuff? The more that you learn and the more that you talk about it, the better off we are in the long run, because we have shut down. We have stopped communicating, and we need to start planting those seeds at a younger age. Because I had one confidential source tell me when I was a baby agent in El Paso, Texas. I said, why are y'all sending these drugs up to, you know, in our backyards? And they said, Stace, if there wasn't demand for it, there'd be no supply. And it made me so mad, but I came up here and I see exactly what he was saying. So anyway, thank you very much for listening to me. Again, if you have any questions or something, pull me outside. I'll be in the back of the room.
I'm cybernetically challenged. Nothing like drinking from a fire hose, huh? I can't tell you how many ODs I've been on as a chaplain for the last 3 years. Randy is in the back. Mark's been in the back. Several of our chaplains are here as well. We've been on a bunch of them, folks. This is real and it's happening. So when she says support your law enforcement, support your law enforcement. You know, make calls, encourage them, ask what you can do. How can you get involved? And oh, so important is voting. Right, we've been doing a voting registration drive for the last 3 weeks here, but we've got to vote, and we've got to be informed voters and make some really good decisions and get some people in, especially the Supreme Court decisions and that kind of thing, because it's an issue. So, any other questions? Well, the mind can only absorb what the derriere can endure. So stand up, take a break. If you need the bathroom, there is some coffee and water and things out back. Grab some, get back here. We'll start up again in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Or 15 if the line in the bathroom's really long. Okay, let's start finding our seats, ladies and gentlemen. How we doing, Haas? You lovely people in the lobby, please head in to your seats. Bunch of chatty Cathys. Oh, sorry, Kathy. All right. So some things that we can do as citizenry. We can write some emails or letters, if you still do that, to our sheriff, to our undersheriff, to our police chief, and give them a word of encouragement. If you see a police officer or sheriff's deputy on the street, give them a word of encouragement. These people have a hard row to hoe. My eldest son is a Gallatin Valley deputy, and involved in law enforcement for a very long time. It's a wonderful career, but it's an extremely difficult career, and they could really use some encouragement right now. They are understaffed, so encourage our county representatives that control purse strings to give them some money so they can get some more people. We need to raise the wages so people can afford to live in this valley and serve and protect it. And that's vital. And I know taxes and all that stuff, but this is an affluent county. There's a lot of money available, so we just need to encourage them to spend it in the right places, not on dumb things. Can I say dumb things? Is that okay? If you haven't guessed, I'm not very politically correct. And with that, I'm going to invite Lowell to come up. And he and his wife started a group, the lifeguard group, and what they do is rescue trafficked young women, young men also, but they're ready and available if somebody calls quickly, and they have an opportunity to get away from whoever their pimp is, whoever's got them captive, whoever's trafficking them, and it's a short window of time, and they need people that can go throughout the county, throughout the state, to reach them in a quick period of time. So he's going to talk to you about that, but he's just going to share some of the heinous things that are being perpetrated against our children, and these young men and women are being trafficked, and there's all kinds of different trafficking, and I'm going to let him explain all that to you. So if you would, welcome Lowell.
Wow, talk about coming to an evening and getting punched in the face, and then, hey, go out and have yourself a little bit of coffee and then come back in and I'll just punch them right in the stomach. My mom always told me the truth hurts, and tonight maybe is just a little bit of the truth of what's taking place in our state. I'm a native Montanan. I grew up in the eastern part of Montana. We always tried to talk ourselves into the fact that we had our own kind of beauty. And, well, I've moved to the western side of the state now. And it's nice to go back, but you do start to miss the mountains really fast. My wife and I have been in the anti-trafficking movement world for the last going on 16 years. And it's certainly not because it was a world that I was familiar with or that I grew up with. I grew up in a very great environment, a great community. Of course, the world, 40 years ago seemed a lot different than the world does today. Somebody asked me the question not too long ago, would you ever go back to high school? And I said, oh, absolutely. I had the sweetest mullet. I'm telling you, it was fine. I'd go back to my Levi 501 shrink to fits, my Nike Cortez with the red swoosh. And then I stopped and I said, Now, are you asking me would I go back to high school the way it was when I went, or would I go back to high school the way it is now? Because one, absolutely. The other, not on your life. I don't think I could survive. And yet, we've got a generation of young men and young women that we need to mandate ourselves to equip and to empower and to enable to survive what this world is offering them. Right now, when we look at human trafficking, I want to challenge you that at some point in your life, you have intersected with human trafficking, whether it was if you were on family vacation, whether it was in your job, your profession, whether it was when you stopped at a mini mart or maybe you stopped at a truck stop. Possibly it was when you stayed at a motel or a hotel somewhere across Montana or somewhere across these United States. Somewhere, somehow, some way, you have intersected with a trafficking victim. And I want to give you some tools tonight that might possibly equip you to interdict into the life of a trafficking victim and possibly offer hope to them simply by being informed, knowing how to recognize and then how to respond and do something. Listening to Stacy, I've heard her presentation a couple times, and she stands up here and she looks, small in stature and looks like she's unassuming, that she'd be very nice. I dare you. I just dare you, Just let us know so that we can form a circle and everybody get a good view. I'm just saying, an individual like that is willing to give their life to protect others on a level that she has, and those that served under her and those that she served with, is pretty incredible. And I heard that she had retired, and we had done some things together. She has always been an asset to us as a non-government agency, just a lot built on volunteers. She's always been available, and many of those that are like her. And so kudos to Stacy. I mean, she's retired. She doesn't have to be here. She doesn't have to keep up on the research. She could go, she knows Spanish, so she could go somewhere Spanish-speaking and be absolutely comfortable doing it on the beach somewhere, but has truly made it a mission to educate not only us as parents, but students. And I stand with you. I could hear the frustration, and I don't know who asked the question, said they had heard that your schools wouldn't let her in. Yeah, I stand with you. Why in the world would you not? Somebody that's willing to do that on their behalf. When we talk about human trafficking, this is usually the response. People always ask, how come human trafficking can be so prevalent and grow so quickly? Because that is our mentality, especially in Montana, because it's taking place somewhere else. It certainly can't be taking place in Montana. I mean, not only we're vigilante-minded, who wants to come up into Montana from Mexico, from South America? Who in the world's, and it's really along the same lines that Stacy talked about. The only thing that keeps human trafficking alive is that there's a demand. Somebody's willing to pay. Somebody's willing to offer the money, whatever it takes, to have sex with a child, no matter if they're American, Mexican, no matter if they're from here or not from here. It just doesn't matter. Now, tonight, I do want to apologize up front that there might be some things that are offensive to you tonight. I don't want to, it's not my purpose, it's not my method, but if it is offensive, please have some grace, and I do ask your forgiveness up front. I also want to let you know that there are some videos that we are going to show tonight that might be a little bit graphic. There's no nudity, nothing like that, nothing sexually graphic. But if you have dealt with sexual assault, domestic abuse, or anything like that in your life, and this at all is triggering to you, and you need to stand up and walk out, please do that. Please take care of yourself. I understand. This is hard stuff to listen to. This is hard stuff to know. But we have got to get past this fact that this is taking place somewhere else. That's really what got us in the situation that we're in the United States. For so long, we were pointing fingers at Thailand, Cambodia, Indonesia, India, Africa, and we were saying, you know what, you need to get your act together and respect people's human rights, human dignity. And if you don't get that together, we're going to place embargoes on you. We're not going to trade with you. And I mean, we were standing, man, we were, patting ourselves on the back. We were talking about how good we've got it over here. We're America. We've got it. And all the while, man, it was growing at levels that some people knew, but not everybody knew. And so now when we start talking about it, everybody's like, how in the world does this just come completely out of the dark and now is being exposed? This is nothing new. In my office, I have a book that was published in 1910. The title of the book is How to Stop the Trafficking of Our Young Girls in 1910. This is nothing new. The fact is that we weren't paying attention. And now we are caught, like my dad would say, we got caught with our pants down. And we've got to make up some ground, and we need to make up ground quick. Why is human trafficking hard to track? It's difficult to track simply because all the aspects and the geographic locations of trafficking situations are so vast. I mean, you heard Stacy talking about just the different types of drug trafficking. Right now, human trafficking is the second leading criminal enterprise in the world today, just behind drug trafficking. You're not going to find human trafficking without drug trafficking as a part. There is still some drug traffickers that are not participating or don't have their hands into the human trafficking side of things and the sexual exploitation. But when you find human trafficking, you're going to find drug trafficking. And it's taking place in so many different situations and so many different aspects. We can't train law enforcement fast enough to help them understand the different types of trends and the different routes that are being taken. And also, we know that victims are not raising their hands, identifying themselves as trafficking victims. A trafficker will understand and knows that if he can find a victim, he can spend the time, whether it takes 2 months, 3 months, a year, in the grooming process. Once he gets her, or once he gets him, or once she gets him, either way, all I need is to put the hook of shame. And once I have the hook of shame, I control them. What do I mean by that? For example, you may have read in the newspaper or seen on the news just as of late the amount of sextortion that's taking place in our state. In the high school that my 4 children graduated from, just last year I got called. I also serve like Dale. I serve as the chaplain for the Missoula County Sheriff's Office. And I got called that we had an incident at Frenchtown High School. I'm going to tell you about Waylon. Waylon was a 15-year-old boy. That afternoon, Waylon's parents gave him his first phone. And just like any good parent, before they completely let go of the phone, his dad looked him in the eye and said these words. I mean, straight dad, right? Don't do something stupid. You understand what I'm telling you? He said, yes. Waylon took his phone. He went to school that afternoon, and he was telling all his friends, showing them that he had gotten his phone, and he was pretty excited about it. And they all told him, download WhatsApp. Make sure you download WhatsApp. Here's my handle. Here's my @ Make sure you add me, and we can start chatting back and forth. And so he did. He got home that night, and he started adding his buddies onto his WhatsApp, and they started chatting. Of course, the call came from mom and dad. It's time to go to bed, time to get the lights off. And Waylon was laying in his bedroom, and as he was chatting with his friends, he thought it was pretty cool how he could keep these conversations going. And all of a sudden, bing, up popped the face of a pretty young girl. Everybody says that he should have known better. I say he was 15. William was a 15-year-old boy. Wow, I mean, he saw that face, and she said a few nice words, and so he added her. Went about talking to his friends, and pretty soon a message came from this pretty young lady, and they started talking back and forth. And after about 20 minutes, pretty soon, it wasn't a text, it was a picture of her fully nude. Right there, Waylon, you should have known something. He's 15 years old. She asked him what he thought of that. Well, 15 years old. And then she said, I'd like to see a picture of you. Waylon, you know better. Remember your dad said, don't do something stupid. Waylon simply lifted up the covers on his bed, pulled down his underpants, and he took a picture of himself and he sent it. Almost immediately, the message came back. And they asked what he would think if that picture went public. What would happen? What would his parents think? What would your friends think? I don't know what Waylon was thinking in that moment, but I can kind of get there in my mind, think of the panic, this 15-year-old boy. Because now the hook of shame was in. I don't need to groom this young man. I don't need to talk him into anything. I've got the hook of shame. And all they asked for was $25 in gift cards, and they gave him a link that he could go on and buy it. He started texting his friends, asking if he could borrow some money. He didn't have $25. Hindsight, we know that it wouldn't have stopped at $25. But he didn't have $25. He texted all his buddies, do you have $5? Can I borrow $10? Everybody came back. I mean, it was 11 o'clock at night, 11:30 at night. We don't have $5. I don't have $10. All Waylon would have had to do was to take that phone and take it into his mom and dad's room and said, I did something stupid. That's all he would have had to have done. But that hook of shame, you'll never understand the power behind it. Waylon waited until morning, waited until his mom and dad left for work. He got in his truck, drove 3.5 miles just past the Forest Service station up to a pond that the high school uses for their biology classes, went and sat under what people said was his favorite tree, opened his phone, wrote a little message to his mom and dad, took out his firearm and took his own life. Over $25. Over a picture. I don't blame Waylon's parents. I don't blame Waylon. I don't blame his friends. I don't know where to put the blame. All I can tell you is that the hook of shame is the coercion piece that traffickers are using against our sons and our daughters. And they are winning this war. Trafficking victims they have a difficult time. And I get it. It's not that they're threatening their life. It's the fact that they're threatening the lives of those around them, those that they love. Traffickers aren't reporting their illegal income on their tax forms. It's just not happening. If we did tax somehow, which sounds completely ridiculous, but if there was a way to tax that, we'd be out of, the United States would be out of debt in a real quick hurry. And don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating for legalizing sex work like some of our politicians are pushing. What's happening across our country and was really happening in the state of Montana is somebody would get arrested on a trafficking charge, and because in the prosecutor game, it's all about wins and losses. A loss and a win both cost money. You better put a W beside that if you want to be reelected as your county attorney. And so instead of moving forward with human trafficking charges that they know is going to be very difficult to prove in a court of law because most citizens that are going to sit on a jury are not educated, and they're not going to understand how to convict somebody who says, I didn't have chains on her. I didn't have handcuffs on her. She could have left any time she wanted. I would drop her off of the, I was her protection. I dropped her off at the motel. That's where she said she was going to go make money. And they'd get that poor young lady up on the stand and they would grill her. Any prosecutor knows that he's not going to win that case, so they plead it down to a lesser charge or to a different charge. Oftentimes, pleading it down to where she would have to be faced with a prostitution charge. And the pimp or the John would get a misdemeanor promotion charge. And the fact is that across Montana and across the United States, no one was collecting data. No one was collecting data because it was an embarrassment. And it's still an embarrassment. Even in our state, you're going to find very little data because we've only been collecting data now for the last 3 years. And anybody that's involved with any research, you know that 3 years worth of data is a pretty small plot point. So there's two sets of questions that I think when you start to confront human trafficking, two sets of questions. First set of questions is asked as a matter of priority. How big is the crime of human trafficking really? Now this question comes to us in a lot of different ways. Understand that a lot of times people think we're conspiracy theorists, we're blowing something out of proportion, making something up that's really not there. I always tell people that human trafficking isn't real until it is. It's just like when there's a missing kid in a community, you put out a call for people to come and help search because they're an endangered missing kid or an endangered runaway, and nobody's really got the time until your kid goes missing, and you can't understand why businesses are still open when everybody knows that your kid's missing. Everything should shut down and stop to find your kid. And don't get me wrong, I completely agree if we could function that way. But the fact is, we have to come to grips is that human trafficking in the United States of America is alive and well. And it's growing right underneath our noses. How many victims are there? Who are the traffickers? Who's doing this? Who are we allowing to do this? You heard a lot of those questions answered by Stacy. As long as that southern border is open, we will have traffickers and we will have victims. Somebody better get a handle on that. If you have never been, if you've never had conversations with individuals that have been on this southern border, or you've not been there yourself, I want to tell you that think of what you have heard from those that are trying to tell you the truth and multiply that. You can stand, I stood just south of Tucson. We went down there working as advocates, trying to help, because these kids that are coming across, 5, 6, 7 years old, coming across by themselves. Groups of kids coming across, looks like they're holding hands as they cry. I mean, it looks like an elementary class that's taking a field trip down to the park as they're walking. One side of the road, you've got box trucks. They've got balloons. They've got candy. They've got music playing, trying to coerce these kids to come over. And they've got great things for them. We're gonna show you the good life. And then we're on the other side. We're doing the same things. We're trying to coerce them so that we can keep them safe. As long as that southern border's open, we will have human trafficking. What are the routes? What are the gains? Just like in drugs, follow the money. Follow the money. What are the trends for us? That's probably the most important thing. We study trends. We've got a group of people, it sounds sickening, and it is, that very closely monitor what's taking place on pornographic sites, porn sites. And because we know that as pornography goes, so does human trafficking. We know that whatever fetish is being searched, whatever the top hits and top search terms are on porn sites, we're going to see it down the road when we look at who our victims are. And then the why and the where. So then it brings us to this other set of questions of really introspection, I guess. And a lot of times, and I think this has become our fallback, is why isn't the government doing more? Government needs to do more on this. We need to do more. Well, I want to tell you that human trafficking, we will never legislate human trafficking out of existence. It's not going to happen. It's not a law enforcement issue. Are they all there to help on the advocacy side and to help stop what's taking place? Absolutely, but they are not going to be the ones that stop it. This is a human dignity, human being issue. And we as human beings need to be moved not by pity, because pity sits and watches and feels bad. Compassion and empathy, on the other hand, takes action. And we as individuals, whether you as a parent, whether you as a teacher, whether you in your profession, or just simply being a human being, you need to, number one, know, and then number two, take action and help bring it to an end. Why aren't we all doing more? Really needs to be our question. So why don't we see it? Human trafficking victims are not bound in shackles. We often tell people that human trafficking, the chains of human trafficking are no longer on the wrists or on the ankles, but they're in the mind. The mental psychology, the psychological manipulation that takes place with trafficking victims is something that even the experts are still trying to understand the levels of manipulation. I heard one individual say that if we could take the tactics that traffickers are using and use them in warfare, we wouldn't lose another war. If we could somehow harness the levels of manipulation that they use, we would win every war that we were in. Trafficking victims aren't always minors. So often we get caught up in this, that it's just kids that are being trafficked. Right now, out of 50.2 million victims in the world today, 50% are children. And that's a horrific number. It's disgusting and it's heartbreaking. But there are also other individuals who are being trafficked, whether they are female or male. It has many forms, including not just sex trafficking, but the labor trafficking as well. We had a couple storms come through the Bitterroot Valley. We had one that was like 105-mile-an-hour winds that came through. And no problem. Knocked a few apples off my tree. Not an issue. We had a storm come through, 30 miles an hour. And I was like, man, after that 105, I'm going to sit on the deck and watch this storm come through. This is nothing. The whole south side of my house, the roof peeled up just like a piece of paper. And I actually checked my Ring camera, and I'm like, what is that in my front yard? What's flying from my house onto my front yard? What? I couldn't even see my grass just loaded with shingles. I tell you that because then, just the beginning of last week, I get a knock on my door after, of course, we called for a few bids, and I get a knock on my door. I go to the door, and this Mexican man standing at my door, and I'm staring at him, and he's staring at me, and I'm like, hello, you rang my doorbell. And he just points off towards my driveway. And I was like, oh, okay. He says, can I park my trailer? And I said, well, did you break down? Or, there was a language barrier that was happening big time. And I was very clear. I'm pretty fluent in Spanish, no español. So he knew where I was coming from. I think I did say hola to him. I mean, I'm not rude. And he wanted to know if he could park his trailer. And I said, are you, somehow we think, I don't know, maybe it's just me, that people that don't speak our language, all of a sudden they are going to understand some sort of sign language. Are you broke down? I asked, or I go, are you broke down? Your truck break down? And he's looking at me like, are you okay? And he finally got out for your roof. And I was like, oh, you're going to fix my roof? Yeah, start tomorrow. And I said, okay. And yeah, you can park your trailer there. The next morning, and I kid you not, a truck rolled in, pickup truck, and 6 cars. And out of those cars, I don't know, it felt like 100 people were in my yard. It wasn't that many, but all these Mexican men jumped out of these cars. And I want to tell you, I got on my phone and I called the roofer, the one that owned the company, and I'm like, hey, listen, please, I'm begging you to tell me that these men are all legal, and they are all getting a paycheck. That's the last thing I need. Not that I would condone it in any way, but I don't need somehow anti-trafficking leader has trafficking victims re-roofing his house. But the fact is it's taking place in Montana, especially in the construction industry. And so I told the guys, like, I hope you're not offended that I called and asked. He goes, no, actually I appreciate it, because we know there's some organizations that are actually making that happen. It's a complex crime. It's hard. A lot of our law enforcement officers, one thing that it just was mandated in Montana the last 2 years, that every law enforcement officer goes through, it's not a lengthy education, it's about a 2.5 hour education class while they're at the academy on what human trafficking is. It's better than it used to be. This slide says 49.6. We just got the new data. It's 50.2 million. That's a 1 year jump. 50.2 million people that are being trafficked in the world today. In the United States, an estimated between 2.7 and 3 million people being trafficked. The percentages are the same: 85% female, 15% that are males. In the year 2000, the first legislation that came into the United States, Trafficking Victims Protection Act. It took us in the United States until the year 2000. Now, for some of you, that seems like a long time ago, but for some of us, that feels like it was just yesterday. But think about that in your mind, that it took us until the year 2000 as a country to put into law that it should not be legal to buy and sell another human being for sexual labor. Now, it's been reauthorized over and over again, but the last time it was 2018, and now it's stalled. It's basically been shoved back into the archives, and no one wants to talk about it since 2018. Now, Montana, I'm a Montanan. Montana was part of what they called the Faltering Four. We were one of the last 4 states to enact or to adopt this legislation or this type of legislation into our own constitution. It took Montana until the year 2015 to make the same statement that it was illegal or not legal to buy and sell a human being for sexual labor. But from 2015 to 2023, there wasn't one conviction on that law. Not one. In fact, in between 2015 and 2023, if you, as a John, tried to procure sex with a minor or an adult, anybody have an idea of what you might have been convicted of, charged with? First-time offense? Take a guess. Be brave. Go ahead. What's that? Soliciting. What would the penalty be? What would the penalty be? 30 days in jail, slap on the wrist, $150 fine. It could be a maximum fine of $1,000, no time in jail. But I mean, we are Montana, so I mean, we're not going to take it to the chin. So second offense, what's it jump up to, second offense? I can't hear anybody. I'm either old, deaf, or what? What's that? 5,000. 250. It's actually the very same. $1,000 maximum, but the average fine was $150. Now, mind you, if there was a prostitute or somebody being prostituted, if there wasn't an education that was there, and if the compassion and the understanding wasn't there, the woman would be arrested on a felony prostitution charge, which had a mandatory jail sentence. Okay, so third offense. You're right, the same. Fourth offense, the same. Not until the fifth offense did it become a felony in the state of Montana, up until 2023. In 2023, we finally started getting our head out of the sand, and a representative out of Billings, Representative Etchert, actually walked House Bill 112 onto the floor, and it began to change a lot of things. It took multiple offenses and brought it down to zero tolerance. We started putting instead of thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars. We started taking property. The forfeiture and those things started happening. It was a big step in 2023. It consolidated our existing laws into 4 updated offenses. It included actions once considered promotion of prostitution. So in other words, we took prostitution, for the most part, completely out. It's still in our Montana code annotated, but it's completely separate and it's completely defined. Aggravated sex trafficking is the same, even if force, fraud, and coercion were or were not involved. Under 18 would be considered child sex trafficking. Why is that important in Montana? The age of consent in Montana is 16 years old. And so this was something very important for us to put in there, is that under the age of 18 would still be considered a child and not at an age of consent when it came to trafficking or forced sex or labor. Labor trafficking included the coercion to compel to work. So very important. Wow, sorry. I got button happy right there. We felt like we didn't have a lot of good data. And so we felt like we needed to put some things into action. So the lifeguard group started the Montana Human Trafficking Hotline. We were knocking on our Attorney General's door for so many years. And finally, Austin Knudsen got into office, and he's like, listen, there's nothing here for it. There's no appropriations that are out there. But you guys have our blessing to do it. So we started the Montana Human Trafficking Hotline. And we just started our 3rd year. And since we've already had 422 contacts. That's just in the state of Montana. And you can see you can either call, text, chat. Our projected for this year, the way it looks, actually, that's probably going to change. We just had a meeting last week, and it looks like we're going to be well over 200 calls just in this year. Here's the contacts per month that come through the Montana Human Trafficking Hotline. 833-406-STOP. It'll be a poster up there for you. Everybody should have that in their phone. Now realize that our hotline is only a tip and a resource hotline. The first thing that you'll hear is when the advocate answers the phone is this an emergency? If yes, hang up, dial 911. If there's something is active right in front of your eyes right now, you see something taking place, this is not the place to report that. So you can see the months. July, we saw a huge spike, and that was simply because the Attorney General's office did an ad campaign. I don't know if you remember that. They were hitting a lot of prime time, especially football, Saturday college football. They were hitting that pretty hard. And so we saw a huge spike. So the these calls were coming from advocacy groups, community members. We liked seeing that. That told us that community members were actually paying attention and wanting to do something, friends and family. But then we had a large amount of calls that were coming from actual victims or survivors. Why were they calling? Sometimes it was they saw grooming taking place, or they saw human trafficking actually happening. Report a tip, all that across the way. Our callers mostly were females. I don't know, maybe it's just a typical male thing. I don't know. I find myself falling in that category sometimes. Why were they calling? More often than not, they were calling for somebody else. Just the ethnicity, the gender, the age. What are they looking for? Victims are looking for housing, looking for general resources, sometimes medical. We had a young girl call. She was from Malta, or she was calling from Malta. Everybody familiar with where Malta is? Yeah, it's like nowhere, or on the way to nowhere anyway. And don't take offense to that. I grew up in Sydney, so we're right on that same road. And she called, and the advocate, as I'm reading the report, asked her how she got there. She goes, well, I'm from Chicago, and my pimp would give us tips if we would do good. And I saved up all my tips for 11 years. And I had enough money, and I ran to the train station one day when he left us alone. Ran to the train station, put my money on the counter, and said, I want to go as far as this will take me. And it took her to Malta. And she called us in from Malta. The hospital there in Malta gave her the human trafficking hotline number. And she said, the question was, what do you need? She goes, I don't know. All I know is I'm away from him, and I don't know what to do. Now, I get it, we're still in Montana, but from Stevensville, Montana, Missoula, Montana, to Malta, we're not going to get there in a few minutes or a couple hours. We had some advocates that were on the ground. We got her. She freaked out at the hospital. We got her to a private clinic, and they were able to give her a little more personal care. And we were going to actually bring her to our safe house, but she had some mental health episodes that we got her into a more specialized care facility for her. Type of trafficking that was being reported, some not specified. The information that people give us on the hotline, they can be fully anonymous. They don't have to answer all the questions, and sometimes they wouldn't. But most often than not, we were getting calls on that it was sex trafficking. I know some of these are pretty small, hard to read. Where are the calls coming from? Not specified was a huge one. Of course, everybody thinks they've been convinced that the cops are dirty, the cops are going to get them in trouble, cops are just going to jam them up, and so they're not willing to give information. Missoula County, pretty big. Yellowstone County, Gallatin County, your county's right up in there. As you can see, it's even the small counties across the state of Montana. So what is sex trafficking? Recruitment, the harboring, transportation, the provision or the obtaining of a person for a commercial sex act, or in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion. 3 very important words that have to be there. The thing that I want you to really pay attention to is the word obtaining. So often we think of the pimp and we think of the one that's doing that. They're the ones that are doing the trafficking. Those that are on the demand side are just as much a trafficker as those that are on the selling side. I have about as much mercy for a John as I do a pimp. I'm still trying to figure out how to be. I still want to go to heaven and not, I know I can't hate. And it's funny, they I don't know how they do it. I don't know if they're unionized, but they kind of came out and said they don't like being called Johns anymore because that's offensive to them. And I was like, oh, well, that's easy. I've got plenty of other names for you, and we could just go right down the line, and I could throw those all out right at you. But they'd like to be called hobbyists now. And again, it's that desensitizing piece. They're not predators. They're not perverts. They're not pedophiles. This is just a sexual orientation, and we need to learn to accept that. And we know that there are people that are acting inappropriately in this lifestyle, but, I would never have sex with a kid, but they have no problem paying money to have sex with another adult. I mean, I don't know. It's that desensitized feeling that they're pushing. Labor trafficking, the definition is very much the same, except for the purpose of what's laid out there. I'm going to skip ahead, because as usual, average age of a recruitment into human trafficking is 12 to 13 years old, 12 years old for a boy, 13 years old for a girl. Average age of a victim is 26 years. So you can see that, we're looking at 13 to 14 years that an individual is kept in this lifestyle before they find time or a place of rescue. Force, simply the physical assault, the sexual assault and rape, physical confinement or isolation. remember that either force, fraud, or coercion has to be proven in a court of law for there to be a human trafficking charge, except if the individual is under the age of 18, then force, fraud, or coercion is implied, which that's a huge step, because now a 14-year-old doesn't have to sit in a witness stand and somehow explain to a jury how they were coerced or how they were forced. So some huge steps that we were taking there. Let's take a look at this.
It was right here in the middle of Plano's Shops at Legacy where a 17-year-old girl escaped from a violent human trafficker she had been with for a year. If not for some observant witnesses watching nearby and intervening, authorities say it's likely she would still be in his clutches. It's security camera video of two people talking outside a nail salon in Plano's Shops at Legacy. You probably wouldn't pay much attention to them until the male stomps hard on the female's foot. It's followed by a violent punch that knocks her to the ground.
I feel sick to my stomach. And for all of us who have daughters, it's just the most unthinkable situation you can imagine.
Collin County District Attorney Greg Willis says you're watching the brutal violence associated with human trafficking play out in public. A passerby notices the man dragging the 17-year-old girl by her hair to the car, throw her into the open passenger side door and close it. She quickly opens it and escapes. By that time, several witnesses were ready to intervene, and the man speeds off by himself.
I'm so proud of those citizens that were there and didn't run away and didn't turn a blind eye.
29-year-old Ricky Stevenson was later captured and sentenced last week to 59 years in prison. Willis says that's a message to traffickers like this one, who flaunt being a pimp on social media, force their victims to get loyalty tattoos, as well as threaten them if they try to leave.
He thought that he could manipulate the legal system here in Collin County by ensuring that the victim not show up. He thought if the victim didn't show up, he would be free.
The victim was only 16 when she was kidnapped and forced into prostitution along with two other females. This Collin County case is the first known anywhere involving a trafficker who was convicted only with the testimony from witnesses and no cooperation from the victim.
When you're
Sometimes I miss things. So help me, what I heard was that there were several individuals ready to intervene. And I'm like, where were they? Like, do I have some wrong kinds of glasses on that they're blocking the view out? 7 people walked by. The one that did the most was the guy that at least put his hands like this the whole time. The car that drove behind could have stayed parked right behind him, not let him leave. Pizza boy could have cared less. He had his pizza and pop on top. The woman behind, walking behind, had her cell phone. She didn't look up one time. If it wasn't for that security footage that caught that young girl would still be in the grips of that pimp today. Now, our insurance, our liability insurance says you cannot tell people to run in the midst of that and to get involved. You will be held liable for that. So I would in no way encourage you to run in the middle of that. But we're going to take a 30-second break from our official presentation, and we're on break. So since you asked, if it was me, if that was my daughter that was getting kicked around, being drugged by the hair, and I saw your face on that security footage, like, we're going to visit about that. Like, I don't know what you could do, but you got to find something. That was a great break. I hope you feel refreshed, and we're back at it just for the next few minutes. No longer can we stand by and allow this type of thing to take place to somebody's son, somebody's daughter. And it's taking place at our truck stops. It's taking place at our Walmarts. It's taking place at our convenience stores and our hotels. And people are turning a blind eye because they do not want to get involved. Let's go back. How is this going to stop? We can throw our hands up all day long, Where's the government? Where are you? If this was your daughter, if that was your son, you would jump in the middle of that. Now, I have a wife, and she is very quiet, gentle, and kind, but I pity that man. If that would have been my daughter and my wife were to see that, she would give her life. She would have bit that man's ears, scratched his eyes, kicked a lot of places. The bottom line is we've got to get involved. We got to stop turning a blind eye. Fraudulent employment offers, it happens all the time. It's how our kids are getting lured across the state of Montana from Weibo. We had a case in Weibo. A young girl made a post online that said simply this: I can't wait to get out of this small podunk town. These individuals, these predators are smart. They fish. They found that comment. Somebody, friend requested her. She's a kid. She accepted the friend request. It's more friends, makes me more popular. They started to converse. You should come down to Las Vegas. Oh, yeah, I can understand. I grew up in a small town too. Blah, 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 over and over. Pretty soon on her phone, she got an airline ticket. Digital airline ticket. I'm going to just at least check out what is there. Opportunity to go down and be a waitress on spring break. 3 years she was gone before she came back to her family. Of course, by the time she got there, the waitress job was full, but this guy had another opportunity, and it was called it's not a restaurant, but they do serve food and drinks, and it's called a gentleman's club. And she hadn't heard about that before because there's not a lot of gentlemen's clubs in Weibo, and there's not a lot in Weibo. And so she started there. Of course, you don't have to take your shirt off like these other ladies, but if you do want to make more money, and pretty soon she's serving tables with topless, pretty soon she's making extra money if a client was interested in taking her one of the rooms in the back. Coercion, threats to life, safety, family. I can tell you that these victims, whether they've been in it for a week or for 10 years, a pimp can look at them and say, listen, you're going to do such and such, or I'm going to kill you. They'll look right back at him and go, do it. Do it, please. So they know better. But instead what they're going to say is, you're either going to go serve the client, or you're going to turn this trick, and if you don't, I bet your sister will. Or I'll go find your mom. Or your niece. She's pretty sexy. Anything you want. Anything you want. They know this game of manipulation and they play it well.
Hi, Zach. Here's another video from my special guy. I can't believe we haven't talked all day. I wish you went to my school or a little closer so we could finally meet.
Hey, kiddo. Dinner in an hour. Don't spend too long on the phone.
Okay, I know you've been waiting for this for a while, so I wanted to give you something special. Is this okay?
Who are you? Why are you doing this?
Last week, Friday, in the Commerce Committee, there was an act called the Take It Down Act that was pushed forth by trafficking survivors. That it was an act that would punish porn sites and other sites that were posting material of non-consented material of victims online. And it would have given the power back to the survivors. It was, they took a 2-day vote, and it was unanimous up until the last day. In fact, it was into the last hour, until Cory Booker came in, and it needed to be a unanimous vote to move out of committee. Cory Booker came in because it was Ted Cruz's sponsored bill. Cory Booker came in and squished it, literally, by his vote in the last hour. Didn't even give opportunity for people to say, what's your problem? What's the deal? We were playing political games with the lives of our children. What's a victim? Why are they being targeted? This is what a trafficking victim looks like. We got a call and said there's a young lady laying in the middle of the road just outside of the airport in Missoula. She's all bloody. We sent our quick response team out, and this is what they found after the blood was cleaned up. Her boyfriend drove her, boyfriend/pimp drove her from Tacoma, Washington. They got as far as Airway Exit in Missoula, and he told her she was going to turn a trick at such and such hotel, and she said, I'm tired of this, I'm not doing it anymore. And this was the way he was going to prove his point. He did this to her, opened the door, kicked her out of a moving car, and drove off, took 2 shots at her, and missed. And this is Riley. And that's how we found her. Riley spent Christmas with my family. First time she ever made sugar cookies. She made sugar cookies with my wife and my 3 daughters as I observed. We're going to move really quick. Human trafficking victims have all the resources taken away from them. A pimp wants them to realize that they are the only resource that they have. They are the one that they can look to. Their clothing, for example, in the state of Montana, if you go to a truck stop and you see a young girl, not at the front door, but at the back door where the truckers come in because that's closer to the showers, you see a young girl in a tube top or a tank top and a short skirt and high heels, and it's the middle of February, something should click in your mind that something's out of place here. Something doesn't feel right. Their clothing does not fit either the weather or the situation. Tattoos. Pimps love to mark their victims. Pimps love crowns. These are just some of the tattoos. A lot of vulgarity. I'm not an expert in women. I do have a mom and a wife and 3 daughters, so I'm kind of at the undergraduate level in understanding women. But I want to tell you from my personal experience, not only in life, but in working with trafficking victims, there's not a woman on the face of this earth that's going to put that on her own body. It's just not going to happen. And I'm tired of hearing it across the board. Well, what about the women that want to do this and do this by choice? Don't even ask me that question. That doesn't even compute with me. It doesn't even make sense. It doesn't even make sense to me at all. Pimps love dollar signs, especially on the hands. That's a brave young lady right there, actually talking about her tattoo and being forced to take that. I don't know if you can notice, look beyond the tattoo. That's a punishment tattoo, this bottom right. At some point, she was disloyal, and he was going to prove a point to her. Now look past that tattoo and just look into the eyes of that young girl. If anything screams pain and hurt, it's those eyes. Pimps love crowns. They're going to put that crown on their victims. Usually it's mixed with a name or an initial that marks them. If they've got a bottom girl, what they would refer to, please pardon my language, what they would refer to as a bottom bitch, that is going to be, they're going to have that queen crown that's just on that bottom left picture, but the crown to the right. We saw a lot of the inside the mouth tattoos, but they realized that those heal very quickly and go away, so they stopped doing that as of late. I don't know who King Munch is, but he is cheap, and that is a terrible tattoo. I told you I've got 3 daughters. I would never in my life ask my daughter to put that on her body. Pimps want their victims to call them daddy. You can see the psychology and all of that. I've been married to my wife 39 years, and I still have not convinced her to put a property of Lowell tattoo on her body yet. This just communicates to them they're nothing but a product, nothing but a commodity. These were actually working codes, but those are so finicky that now what pimps have done, they've moved to a QR code, much more forgiving. And where that's going to be used is a pimp's going to put a QR code on his victim to where when a hobbyist is done with his date, he will just go up and scan her QR code. It takes him to a hobbyist site, and it's just her review site. He's able to say she's who she says she was. She's willing to do all the things on her ad that she says. She's not involved with the cops. Victims don't know where they are, and they don't know when they got there. They don't know where they're going, and they don't know when they're leaving. It's plain and simple. They are moved across the state. When they come into the state of Montana, they're usually coming up from the Tri-Cities into Spokane, again, following that same route as drug trafficking. They come across into Montana. They're going to make a stop in Missoula. They're going to start placing their ads down the I-90 corridor, wherever the most hits gets. If they start getting a bunch of hits here in Bozeman, they're going to just he'll move his stable right down the road, wherever the hits are. If he starts getting hits back in Missoula, he'll go back. If it's up to Flathead, he'll follow that. Might stop in Butte, but even pimps don't want to stop in Butte. Their stories are very scripted, but they don't make sense because they're taught a story and they stick with the same story. But it doesn't make sense. It makes no sense at all. They feel like they're constantly watched. They feel like that pimp can see through walls. That's why when they get to a clinic, the nurse will look at them and say, listen, you're safe in here. You can say whatever you want. No one will ever know. And they will look at that nurse and say, I'm telling you, he will know. He can hear everything that I say. They live under constant fear. Again, it's that hook. They're afraid of security. They're afraid of cops and their uniforms. A lot of airports now are moving half of their public safety to wearing uniforms and half of them being in plain clothes simply for this issue and domestic violence victims. Their language is often over-sexualized and very vulgar. One mom whose daughter at 13 was being trafficked right out of her own house, it's the way she picked up on it. At dinner time, she's talking about things that 13-year-old girls don't talk about typically, just over-sexualized, vulgar language. And mom started doing a little bit of looking and stopped giving into this whole thing of, well, my kid has privacy and, you know, I really can't check her phone and I can't check the things in her room. It's like, okay, you're either going to be mom or you're going to be friend. If you're going to be friend, your kid's down a road of destruction. If you're going to be mom, then put your foot down and do mom things and do dad things. They don't carry their own ID. Another adult is going to carry their identification, their papers. They can't make eye contact with you. If you approach them at that truck stop, that mini mart or wherever, they will not look you in the eye. They've been told that if they look somebody else in the eye, that is considered out of pocket and there will be punishment that will come their way. Example, a loyalty tattoo across your cheek. More often than not, it's going to be a beatdown. They simply, no matter what you say. So if you approach a victim, please don't say, hey, just look at me, because to them, that's a threat. If they don't look at you, that's fine. If they want to stand back to back with you and you want to just speak life to them, if you want to just be an encouragement to them, stand back to back. Stand across the store. Just do something. 88% of victims sought health care during their exploitation. 67% of victims came in contact with an educator. They were going to school while they were being exploited. 70% of human trafficking victims used the hospitality industries, motels, mini-marts, truck stops, restaurants. 95% of victims came in contact with law enforcement. It's important for us. One of our huge mandates is that we want to train professions, industries, and all these industries are on top of it. We have a school assembly program called the Lifeline Assembly. We stand in front of kids and basically convince them that you are one of two things. You are either a lifeline or you need one. And very much like Stacy, we just not a lot of principals want to open the doors. We've been into a lot of the state's smaller schools. We've been in states all over the country. But for some reason, Montana just does not want to talk about this. I can tell you that 89% of victims want to get out. They just don't think there's another resource for them. I've got some information in the back, if you're interested in looking at that, about our safe house that we have. It's got our email address. You can get all that information. I'm going to skip right to the end if you want. There is what a trafficking victim looks like when somebody gives a rip. That's Riley. Riley had lost her daughter. Riley got her daughter back. A wonderful young man, willing to look past everything that she had been through in life, married her, and there's her family today. Minus one kid, because she just had, 2 months ago, had another baby girl. So when I say that I talked way too much and we didn't get through the slides, now you know what I mean. There's the hotline number, 833-406-STOP. It's really not hard to remember. You can catch us on the web. You can live chat or send a text. Either way. If you're interested in getting in touch with us, you can find us on Instagram, or there's a QR code that takes you to our website. I'll be in the back. Any questions that you have, I'm willing to stay as long as you have questions. Dale, thank you very much. Thank you, Pastor, for giving your church. This is tough stuff to talk about. I know that we're not all going home and talking about how great this evening was. Maybe we're just locking the doors a little bit tighter and just paying a little bit more attention. But thanks for caring. Thanks for being involved. And again, I appreciate Calvary Chapel here for making this available to you, and really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, brother. All evil needs to prevail. Hello? All evil needs to prevail is for good people to do nothing. We got to do this. We got to talk to our friends. We need to have thoughtful conversations with people we don't necessarily agree with politically. And we need to share this information and this truth with them. We need to get involved with people like these. Be available in case they need somebody to go pick up some poor girl, some poor guy that's being trafficked. So I encourage you to go grab some of the information, pray, and see what the Lord might be calling you to. Because it's a big deal. And if we don't do it, who's going to? Yes?
So all of this is really great, but I'm not hearing how we can be in action. Like, yes, we can know, now we have those tools, but how do you physically be in action?
Well, eyes open, seeing something, saying something, and like he said, if you see a girl standing at a truck stop or a gas station or something that is just so out of place that clearly something's going on, try to have a conversation with her. See if you can get her to a safe place. I think that's what he was talking about, but I know they have more resources for those kinds of things. If you see something, call law enforcement. Say, I went to this seminar, and I don't know but it sure looks like there's something going on here and it needs to be checked out. Right? Get information. Obviously, be careful. Don't put yourself in harm's way, because these people will kill you if they think you're trying to bring harm to them, right? So be very careful, very cautious. But we can do a lot without putting ourselves in harm's way. I personally don't care about being in harm's way. I'm okay with that. It's okay. If that's what needs to happen, that's what needs to happen. But we got to do something. Yeah.
I was just going to say, one way is pictures. You always have your phone on you. Start taking pictures of that kid. Take pictures of the guy if he doesn't see you, the vehicle, whatever he may be in. You can take photos.
Absolutely. Photos are great. In fact, there's probably a girl at Highlight, a woman actually, that was thwarted in being attacked because somebody was paying attention and started taking pictures and talking to them, because it looked like a guy was trying to lead her away off to a remote area where nobody was. And somebody had the presence of mind to start taking pictures and talking to him. Hey, how's it going? And just snap, 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 snap with her phone. And I'm certain that it thwarted an attack. So yeah, there's things you can do. That's happening at Highlight. That's happening at the truck stops here along I-90. It's happening in Livingston. It's happening out at the one off of Amsterdam Road. Those things are happening. If you're watching, if you're paying attention, you'll see it and see something and say something. And like I said, you can get involved with their organization, the Lifeguard Group, and be an advocate. Be there, like he said. We got a hold of some people, and they were able to go get this girl, right? They can't get across the state in the 15 or 20 minutes that they might have alone, and get that. They have 15 or 20 minutes where maybe they're alone, 10 minutes where they're alone. And if there's advocates there that can be reached, that can get there and get them, praise God. Right? And I started off this night saying that it's not supposed to make us live in fear, and I don't think we need to live in fear, but we certainly need to do something. And I was reminded of Nehemiah when all of the wall was being half built, and then there were threats from all of their neighbors to stop that. And Nehemiah said, nevertheless, we made our prayers unto our God, and we made preparation against them day and night. We set a watch. Be mindful, look around. Like we saw in that video, people were walking by in their own little world while this poor girl was being beaten by this animal. That doesn't happen in my world. There's lots you can do. Bring attention to it, get help, rally the people, and go to their aid. I can say that I'm not going to get sued by liability. We need to get involved. Does anybody have any other questions? No? Well, thank you all for coming out tonight. This is a paramount thing. I wish to the good Lord above that we never had to have this conversation, but we do. And we need to know, and we need to do something about it. And we can be a vital part of that. Again, elections are critical. We need to have thoughtful conversations with people that we don't necessarily agree with politically, and convince them. Tell them of these things that you've heard, and have a thoughtful conversation. Arguments don't accomplish anything, but be informed, have a thoughtful conversation, and engage your neighbors in fact. Change their minds. Encourage them to look into it for themselves. That's all we can do. Public discourse is what we have, and it's a great tool. But we've lost our art to communicate, because that's what communists do. They get people angry and armed up against one another, and then you're just my enemy and I can't talk to you. Well, that's hogwash. We're all Americans. We're all neighbors. We can be neighborly. And we can talk to people that don't necessarily agree with us on every issue, but we can have thoughtful conversations, right? Would you join me in prayer? Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing to light the issues at hand that we spoke of tonight. We pray your hand of blessing on those dear people that have shared tonight. And Lord, for the ministries that they do. We do pray that you would make their voice loud. Lord, that they would be heard by administrators, by police chiefs, by sheriffs, by all the people of authority, the mayors, the governors, the city councils, the county commissioners. Lord, that we could engage in very real ways with financial aid to law enforcement to engage in these things, with community outreach, with community impact teams. And Lord, we just ask that you would just make a way with that. We do pray for those in law enforcement, Lord, that do walk the line, that stand the gap between good and evil. And we pray that your gracious hand would be upon them, that you would keep them safe, that you would give them discernment, Lord, that you would make them vigilant, and that you would guard their hearts, that dealing with the difficulties of society, Lord, would not taint their heart or their character or their being. Lord, it is a calling. They are your ministers for good, and we pray that you would bless them. Lord, that your hand would be upon them, their families, as they sacrifice greatly to serve this community, this county, this state. And Lord, we do ask that you would call us, that you would gift us in areas that we might help to protect some of these innocent children. Lord, we do need you. We call upon you, Lord, to do a great and mighty work. Work in the hearts of your people. We humble ourselves before you and ask for your help. In the glorious name of Jesus we pray. Amen.